Hey TV fans, Bored Now back with you. On this video I'm going to be reviewing from Season 1, Episode 8. The episode is called Broken Windows, Open Hearts, or Open Doors, sorry. Got a bit cheesy there, but no. Broken Windows, Open Doors is the name of the episode. Full spoilers from the start of this review. So this is a really solid episode and a nice setup really for what the rest of the season is going to be, because part of this episode is a flashback for Boyd, so like a look into his past and backstory. And it's funny because what it does is it shows him and his family first arriving in the town and just how things develop from there. We see that he has been into the woods in the past, so that's something then this episode sets up, and that it didn't really work out very well, and that's partly why there is this friction between him and Ellis in the present. We also see what happened to his wife, Boyd's wife, which was very tragic, and we see that then sets up what he feels he needs to do by the end of the episode, and that is go back into the woods to try and save them, to try and get answers. And it's also to honour the preacher's dying wishes, so it's the preacher dying which has really forced Boyd's hand. And so what happens is he takes Sarah into the woods with him, and yeah, that's the end of the episode, and it's a really intriguing development. But I'll just say, it's funny because I remember a similar episode to this in the first season of Ozark, and it's a flashback, and that whole episode is in flashback. It's the family's life before the main plot of the show, basically. And I didn't really like that episode. It was one of the weaker episodes of the show. But this one works better just because the whole thing isn't a flashback. It does cut between the present and the past, and it you can see parallels. So it's quite well done, and it just does a good job of showing things that are important to Boyd's backstory and his current state of mind. And I think the reason why this is such a good role for Harold Pinio's is because you see him the night after this stuff going down in the present, and just how bruised and beaten down and emotionally scarred he is. He's just really convincing in showing that. But this stuff, as I said in the past, is really poignant, and it paints a good picture, and it just works very well in the episode, showing his motivation and how he has changed since coming into town. And it's quite a tragic story because we see that him and his family are very much happy and in a good place when they arrive, and you see that the bond with the son Ellis is much closer. And there's this funny little thing because it's revealed that the wife, I think her name was Abby, was actually an ex-veteran, a soldier. And there's this funny little nickname that they have for Boyd, and I think that's something which is going to come back in a later episode, but so that probably will become important. But what I like about their dynamic is that it's Boyd who is the more sort of jovial, maybe laid back one in a way, or certainly more of a family man, and less kind of hardened when he gets there. And in a way it's more Abby you might think of as being the tougher one or the more masculine one. So I quite like them because of what happens, and because Boyd has to step up and become the sheriff of this town and has more responsibility. I like that flips around. We see the reasons why he has this change of character. So I really like that. and they're welcomed into the town by the preacher, and he's the one who stops. Well, someone else I think stops them, and they're not quite sure why. Like, the person is acting really weird. I can't remember who it was now, but the preacher like stops them and welcomes them to the town, and it slowly dawns on them that there's something really messed up going on, and they start seeing people acting really weird, and they see some bodies, so they quickly start twigging, and something isn't quite right there. And the preacher is the one who introduces them to the rules of the town, and like he takes them down into, I think it's meant to be the cellar, then we've seen like the underground cellar, and they're there with a bunch of other people who are also new into the town. So I think we're seeing this from quite an early stage. So it's the preacher who's like their intro, their introduction. So that's pretty fitting again, considering Boyd is now motivated to go into the woods based on the preacher's belief that Sarah can help them go home, basically. So that again works nicely. But the backstory with Abby is like so tragic, because slowly she starts acting out of character and really paranoid, and it's revealed it's because of her PTSD from like the wartime. Then that just slowly builds up, and I guess this new town and stuff going on around her can't really help. So we find out that in the present, Ellis has a lot of hostility towards Boyd because he blames him for what happened, and also because the original mission into the woods, which we also see in the flashback, doesn't go very well. But yeah, the scene when Abby, like, Boyd has to kill her is what it comes down to. He kind of panics because she's got a gun and she's killed a bunch of people anyway, and at some point someone heads towards her and she's about to kill that guy, and he just panics, is like the context of the scene, and ends up killing his own wife, which is, well, even worse than you could imagine it would be. So it's really understandable and paints a strong picture of why Boyd has such a burden on him. And like, Ellis is a dick in this episode once again. Like, he's not really my favourite character, because there's a scene before Boyd goes off into the woods with Sarah where Ellis is like wounded because of the previous night, and you've got Fatima, the girlfriend, she's like looking after him, and Boyd comes in at one point because he wants to say goodbye before he heads off into the woods, and Ellis is just being a major dick towards his father. And Fatima's supportive. She says you'll regret it if you don't say goodbye before you leave, and she says this must be so hard on your father as well. And like, it works for the drama, because then he goes after Boyd and they do have like an emotional goodbye, and he points out quite rightly that if it wasn't for the talisman, then him and Fatima would have died the previous night. And Boyd says, yeah, when I get back I'll tell you more about what I've been doing. And they have an emotional father-son moment, so it does work. And as I said, the flashbacks really add quite a lot to Boyd's story and his motivation, and it's a good setup for the rest of the season now, with him going into the woods with Sarah, considering how he has a lot of ill will towards her now, but he's carrying out the preacher's dying wishes essentially. So that's really meaty stuff. There's some good possibilities, and also the survivors in the present have been welcomed into Donna's house, and we see, well, with Boyd leaving especially, like, Kenny starting to step up, and like, they're just setting things in motion, like the running of how this is all going to work. And there's some hostility and resentment because some people, like that quite big guy, the one who's like a bit nerdy and a bit douchey, like, he's kicking up a fuss about like welcoming them in when they don't really deserve to be there, or like bad stuff could happen. That he's just being quite douchey, and like Donna rightly puts him in his place. Another thing that happens is that Donna agrees to let Jimmy and Jade build their radio tower. So once again, this is very similar to what they did in the first season of Lost, because they come together in this episode because Jade is looking for Victor because he saw him with Julie on like the previous night, so thinks she might know where he is because he thinks that Victor can help him with this stuff. So Jade, being Jade, sort of bursts in on the family, even though, yeah, that's not the way to go, and he's being a bit jerky. Once again, Jade is really funny. As I said, I'm not sure how to take him all the time. He's definitely the Sawyer of this show, and sometimes that can be quite endearing, and other times it's like, it's a little bit grating, but we get some decent stuff with him in this episode because Jimmy puts him in his place, like takes him outside, says, hey, that's my family, you know, stay away, stay clear. And then they start talking about the radio, and that's when they start getting the idea. And Jimmy once again gives him a strong talking to, because it's like, hey, you've got this radio, we can work together, it could help us get out of here. So that's when they ask Donna, and Donna agrees that they can use her house to experiment and try and build this radio tower and start off. So that puts that in motion, which is pretty solid stuff. There's also a cute little moment with Christy and with Kenny, because Christy is staying like through the night with the patients from the previous night and like attending to their wounds, and it's quite a sweet moment because Kenny brings her a book to read through the night, and like she says, I don't know if I'll have time, but if I get a few minutes, I'll give it a read. And she gives him a little kiss on the cheek, and it's a nice moment. I do quite like their dynamic and their like vibe as a couple, and you get like a few like smaller character moments like that, but the big stuff is obviously Boyd, and then some of the tension and drama with Donna bringing these people, the surviving people, over to her house, and then the radio tower stuff being put in motion. But it's a good episode, I think. Like, the flashbacks were definitely effective, and a good showcase for Boyd, and a nice setup for things moving forward. So that's from episode 8 of season 1. As I said, broken windows, open doors. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. You can also support the channel monetarily at patreon.com/borednow. Just something I've started doing in the last month or so is a new monthly recap show where me and some guests will talk about what movies and TV shows we've been watching for the last month. So we do one for each month. I've done a couple already. I've done one for September, and I've done one for August and then September. And as I said, the idea is that I have a different guest on each time and sort of rotate, so you can already find the first couple up there. I just posted the latest one actually the other day with Alyssa from Horror Movie Tea, so you can check that way out. And also on Patreon, you get these from reviews a day early if you're following me on Patreon, and a bunch of other perks for just $1 a month as well. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon.